Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I had someone ask me the other day in a video, what do I think, because I seem to agree with Ripto and the starting strength guys on a lot of things. I have a few disagreements with them, but more or less, I generally agree with the majority of what they say and consider them to be a positive influence on the fitness world and the lifting world today. I was asked, what do I think their most important contribution is? Let me put on my +5 out of weaponsmithing. Work on skilling up my crafting a little bit and let's talk about this. They've done a fair number of things. I'm going to get to what I think the most important thing they've done is. As far as if I had to pin it down to one thing, I mean, we could argue about, yeah, they've made linear progression popular. They've got people back into barbells in general. Those are big. Those are important. They've promoted the idea that it's understood in the strength and conditioning world that strength and size go hand in hand. That strength is the foundation. Strength is the foundation of all performance. Those are all pretty good things, but I don't know that they have the exclusive domain of those. Meaning they've promoted a lot of positive ideas. I mean, again, having people squatting 3 days a week, there you go, that's positive. But if I had to narrow it down to what do I consider to be the single most important thing they've done, besides the idea is promoting a good book, because I do recommend that everyone get a copy of Starting Strength. I think it should be in every lifter's library. You should have that book on your shelf. I think it's a good idea. But I'm going to say they've made the press acceptable again. They've made the press a popular exercise. They've made it a safe exercise. And they've returned it to being a competitive lift. Because they started strength lifting, which is a strength sport, competitive endeavor. They've made the press a competitive lift again. And for those who don't know what I mean by the press, I'm talking about the strict standing overhead press. Because for a long time it was a rarity in gyms. People were afraid to do it. It was by many people considered to be a counter-indicated exercise, and even overhead pressing in general by some people, such as some of these nincompoops like Ian McCarthy, who pretends to be science-based but doesn't seem to know anything about training. Earlier on in YouTube, some of these people, they were against exercises like this. They've made it popular again. And they have broken down very succinctly why it's a safe exercise, and that when it is done correctly, Ripto has clearly explained, and so have some of his other coaches. They have very, very clearly explained, both in discussion and pictures and diagrams, how if that lift is performed correctly, it cannot cause shoulder impingement. And have promoted the idea of understanding that it helps balance the shoulder girdle out. And I like that. I like that a lot because I happen to believe that the press is an indispensable exercise. I don't care what your training goals are. If you can physically do this exercise, you should be doing it. And what I mean by that is I literally don't care what your training goals are. For example, let's say you guys who train for aesthetics. That exercise contributes tremendously to that classic aesthetic look because it builds the entire shoulder girdle. And people need to remember that there's a difference between a seated press and the standing press. A standing press to where you start on your chest, you drive and then push your head forward under it and you push the bar back, works more of the other heads of the shoulder. It works more of the shoulder girdle more completely than a lot of these seated presses do, in addition to the upper chest. All right, for guys who are chasing that aesthetics thing, having bigger delts, bigger upper chest, bigger traps, and bigger triceps, particularly the long head, because the long head gets worked a little more on that than other presses because of the overhead component. Those are oftentimes weak points for people aesthetically. And almost never ever in that world will anyone ever be considered to have an upper chest, delts, and triceps that are too big. It's almost unheard of. If anything, those tend to be your 90% chance going to be lagging in one of those. All right, that is an area that you usually want to develop as far as you possibly can, particularly for drug-free people, for people who do not use drugs. Those are some of the most difficult muscles to maximally develop because drug users tend to have overly developed upper pecs, traps, delts because they have more androgen receptors there. They respond better to anabolics. For guys who are clean, those are very difficult muscles to bring up. This exercise works the entire area that is usually one of the hardest spots, if not the hardest region for a natural lifter to bring up. So the guys who are chasing that classic aesthetic look, this exercise is invaluable, and it happens to be a good core exercise on top of it. But when I mean the whole shoulder girdle and why I mean this exercise specifically, because it works the triceps and the rear delts and everything a lot more than a seated press does. In addition to the fact that it works the core and it's a full body exercise. It's absolutely invaluable for that. What about field athletes, contact sport athletes? How about if you play football and you need to hit someone on the field? All standing overhead presses, whether it's the press, the push press, are invaluable. So if you play football, for example, it's an extremely useful exercise. How about if you are a boxer, MMA fighter? Yeah, it's going to affect your striking a lot, isn't it? And again, overhead work standing, so that you have to brace your core. You have to get other muscles involved. It's extremely valuable for contact sport athletes of any type, whether it's a field sport, combat sport, who need to have pushing power or punching power while standing on their feet. All right, it's extremely valuable. About power lifters. Yeah, because it helps reduce your chance of injury on the bench press. Kind of go back to other things. If your pecs are not the weak link in your bench press, it's going to be your delts and your triceps. It builds the delts and the triceps. It also is a shoulder exercise that can be performed without risk of impingement to the shoulders. Because it's pressing specific, that's going to make it a good assistance exercise for any sort of bench press. And again, it tends to bring up other areas of the shoulder to balance the shoulder girdle better, that will reduce your chances of injuring your shoulders while performing a max bench. So for power lifters, it's an extremely valuable exercise. What if you're going to be an Olympic lifter? Again, assistance exercise. I know Olympic lifters right now. I know several who compete personally. Watch them train. Train at the same gym with some of them sometimes. They use this as an accessory exercise. So the standing press is an all-around valuable exercise irrespective of what your training goals are. Whether it's field performance, powerlifting, aesthetics, any of those, it is one of the single most valuable exercises ever made. As far as upper body exercises go, I would say it is possibly the most valuable, or tied for the most valuable upper body exercise you could do. They've made it popular again. They've explained and shown how it's a safe exercise to perform. And people need to understand, 10, 15 years ago, this is an exercise that was very rarely done. You didn't see people doing this very often in gyms. Outside of like strength and conditioning circles, you didn't see this. Gym bros didn't do it. Now you see people doing this exercise in gyms everywhere. And I think starting strength played a big role in that. I think they played a big role in that. And now they've turned it into a competitive lift in their own strength sport. So they now have people competing at this, and it replaces the bench press in their series of lifts. That's awesome. I think that's an enormous contribution. It's an enormous contribution. To the point to where people are saying, what do you mean? It's not a safe exercise. You need to go see their material on it. No, they've got really good material breaking down why this exercise, when performed correctly, and how to perform it correctly, how it cannot physically cause an impingement of the shoulder. You have to perform it incorrectly. So again, I mean, it's a fantastic exercise, and they've made it popular again. They've made it safe again. We see it everywhere in gyms. I mean, to me, it's a lift that I'm focusing on a lot these days because I have strength goals on it. Like for me, my goal for this year, I want to hit 225 for a triple by the end of the year on the strength press. And mine is from touching my chest. So none of this down to my chin. That's my goal for the year on this exercise. So it's an exercise that I value. I value a lot. Really value this exercise. And they've made it popular and safe again. Because it was an exercise that had almost been thrown in the exercise graveyard. In fact, that Sebastian Sunny guy actually made a video and put it in the exercise graveyard. I mean, what an ignoramus. Again, there's a reason that guy can only bench 225 when he went to a powerlifting meet. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.